Everything starts from awareness.
Good leadership is simply catalyst.
Focus on the reason and you'll find inspiration in anything.
This impact continues to grow.
Conversation about intentionality.
If you change nothing, nothing will change.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project Spiral. My name is Tim.
And I'm Abigail.
Abigail does not know this, but we have an advertisement for you, brought to you by Mr. Plum. And it's funny that this is our advertisement because Abigail is in fact about to be one of the proud owners of Mr. Plum. So we have, with no contract, no written agreements, Mr. Plum is proudly supporting this episode. If they wish to sue us for mentioning this, Abby would be suing herself. So we don't think that'll happen, but please shop at Mr. Plum in Greenpoint, New York, and you can enjoy food brought to you by Abigail Steckler.
Okay, for some context about what the heck that was all about. So basically, my fiance and I have just bought a grocery store called Mr. Plum in Greenpoint, and it's been a very long process, but it's actually happening. And so we're going to be taking over official ownership next week, which is very exciting. So yeah, stop on by. We'd love to see you there.
Yeah, so we wanted to do a recap episode of an amazing year. We began this year as the 2033 podcast. We went through a metamorphosis in our so-called cocoon, and we emerged as a beautiful butterfly called Project Spiral. And Project Spiral, it was fun coming up with the name of it. I remember when we were thinking about potential names in a ski lodge on the top of a mountain in Vermont, and how we eventually got to it, which was we were thinking about symbols for hope, and we came across the idea of a double helix, which has a lot to do with DNA. And
you're close. So basically, a helix, a single helix or a spiral, is a symbol of hope. And then a double helix is DNA. Yes. So we really liked that symbol. We liked it for what it represented, and we also liked the shape. We liked that you could spiral down, you could spiral up, you could spiral out, you could spiral in. You can spiral in every direction. But
yeah, anywhere you want.
Moving. We also really like that a spiral isn't a straight line. That much like progress that we've talked about in so many different aspects of the show, journeys often loop back around.
And also at the time that we were coming up with this name, Trump had just been elected to office. We were sad. And we got soon sadder as soon as he got elected and gave that god awful inauguration speech. And it was really interesting just how apt the conversation felt. And it's interesting that we started this podcast around another crisis, which was the pandemic. I'm just very appreciative that we've adjusted as needed. Like in the past, it was saying we just want to talk to cool people and see what happens. Cool people doing things around the world at a time that we felt so isolated with COVID. And now it's just saying not just people that are doing things, but how are people doing when they feel hopeless? How do you get out of bed in the morning? How do you take one step outside of the door? And it was really cool hearing from a number of perspectives how to do that. And I'm, in hindsight, just so appreciative that we started this topic.
Yeah, because it was also just like very personal, right? I mean, because I think we were both coming from a point a year ago where we personally were feeling very hopeless about the state of the world. So we wanted to bring listeners a sense of hope, but I think more fundamentally, we wanted to find reasons to hope ourselves. So yeah, I'm just curious as like a little mini wrap up of the year, if we've succeeded in that. Do we feel more hopeful in December 2025 than we did in December 2024?
Does it count if we just feel a little bit more hopeful, or do we have to be a ton more hopeful?
I think anything counts.
Great, we'll count. So we'll count as a little bit. That reminds me, like we've been doing a lot of surveys for different projects that I've been doing theater for, and we ask people like, have you had any improvement? And even if it's like gone from like moderate to slightly more, we're like, great, we did it. we succeeded. No, but we've had a lot of more than that. But it's just interesting how we measure hope. And I think one of the markers that help me kind of judge measuring that question that you're saying, Abby, is the idea of just saying like, do one thing, do one step. And that's a theme that came up earlier when we were doing 2033. And as it's evolved into Project Spiral, that was the idea of just saying any action for anything higher, countering hopelessness is in itself hope. And I think Anna Zoe was talking about this, that the definition of hopelessness is inertia, is doing nothing. And so I was just really appreciative of that concept of like every little thing that you do it to counteract any bad thing in this world, anything that you don't want to see is in itself a form of hope. So yes, I say yes, and my goalposts about what hope means have changed. But how about for you?
Well, before we get to me, I have more questions for you. So
Please.
you feel a little bit more hopeful. What has made you feel more hopeful over the past 12 months? And does it have anything to do with our show?
I do work for an organization called Creative Connections. Our dad actually runs it. We do a lot of family projects together, if you haven't noticed. It's a global exchange organization. We were doing some talking about how, so I work in theater, and funding for all sorts of nonprofits have felt like they're going by the wayside. And a lot of organizations have experienced that this year. And one thing that we were talking about is just saying, how on earth do we counter these aspects? And the idea of ethics came up, and I was just like, ethics. I'd taken classes in ethics in college that we were forced to take, and I honestly was a waste of time. I remember I timed myself for how quickly I could write like a necessary paper, and I got it under. I did like 4 minutes for one page because I just did not care about it at all. And I was very proud of that timing. But now it seems that like there's an overwhelming need for better ethical thinking, especially as role models and others that we grew up saying like, we want to espouse to, that from leadership, we trust that less and less and less. So we were just saying, how do we have a curriculum where we help students reason for themselves? How do you make tough choices? Like when things are tough, when you have to make a decision between two right choices, between values that might be good in different places, whether it's truth or loyalty, or short-term versus long-term thinking, whether you care about more about justice or you care more about mercy, which you see all the time in our society. Which one do you care more about? And we developed this curriculum using theater, using real stories that the students were talking about. We linked with an amazing school in Uganda called Tender Talents. And we ran a workshop this entire fall between that school and a school in Norwalk, Connecticut. And it was so cool seeing the power of theater and storytelling to talk about some of the toughest issues, and seeing how young people, it's so refreshing being around young people where it's just, I sound so old, it's so refreshing being around young people where they're handling issues around AI and countering ICE and doing all these issues from so much more balanced perspective than I think we had. I think as millennials, we grew up saying the world should be a great and hopeful place. And then we've been constantly let down. And I think Gen Z never had that. So it's been really cool saying from that perspective of saying like, we never got any of the promises that were made to earlier generations. Let's still fight for it. And it's been really refreshing being around young people and doing that. So teaching and being around theater and storytellers has been really impactful for me.
But you still haven't answered. You haven't answered the question though. Has anything in this show made you feel more hopeful?
I thought you said outside of the show.
No, I said in and outside.
Yeah, a number of things have impacted my perspective on hope inside of the show too. And I'm thinking about Aiden and his work with Animal Council, and saying that like, hey, animals should have rights in our legal system as well as humans, and saying that like even in the era of Trump, we can still care about that, and we can and there's countries that are moving towards that around the world. Talking with Kehkasha about how you impact the world environmentally. Sam Bliss and his work with Food Not Bombs in Burlington, Vermont, and how he's redefined the very aspect of what community means and mutual aid. And that's personally impacted how I interact with my friends and others of redefining what community means. So it's cool seeing how, like, even in a time where there's a lot of like darkness from above, to not put it, I thought it was accidentally very poetic, but but even with that, there's people still doing amazing things. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I feel similarly. I feel like one of the things that I have learned this year, that a big part of the practice of hope is kind of accumulation of stories and proof that having hope does get you out of the door, does inspire you to take a first step, and that can lead to so many other things. Every person we talk to is just like another kind of like brick in that wall that we're building, and there's like another example. And if we just think about like, yeah, I mean, everyone you mentioned, we've talked to so many people. Sam doing Food Not Bombs in Burlington, Kikashan doing their amazing work with Green Hope Foundation, Nada doing architecture, Aiden saving animals, Anna Zoe and Eileen with their very theoretical and kind of poetic view of hope and the future. Oh, and of course, Connor with his amazing work in advocacy. All these
Yes.
people, they could have so easily not done the amazing things they're doing. All of them, any of them, could have succumbed to the hopelessness that I'm sure that they feel, because we all feel that. But instead, they chose to believe that they can do something different, that they can combat this, that they can make the world at least a little bit better. And because they believed that they could, they took those actions, they moved forward, and they all have improved people's and animals' lives in very interesting ways and tangible ways. I don't know. That's just like like I said, like it's kind of this like accumulation of examples, and I feel like that, like there's so much value in that, and to have an archive of those conversations, to be like, actually, look, having hope does make a difference. It's real, but it is like an active thing that you have to choose every single day, because it's never going to be something that you feel automatically. And likely, if you look around, if you get all your information from the news or whatever it is, you're not going to automatically feel hope from that. You're going to have to seek out those conversations and those interactions where you can learn to hope. And then you're going to have to work on yourself to actively do that. And it's been just really cool talking to so many people who are doing really cool stuff.
I'm thinking about the concept of what you're saying of like, is it automatic or not? This is a question I've been saying of like, what like, I've been wrestling a lot with the idea of purpose, and just saying like, hey, here's an amazing platform that we have to speak. How can I use it more? How can we use this concept of hope in our voices to do something different in my theater work? And often feeling like I'm not doing enough. And that the more that I feel like I'm not doing enough, the more that it kind of feels like I'm spiral. And so it's interesting of just saying like, how do you know when you're doing enough? And we've joked on the podcast that my personality has become about marathoning. And to those people, I say, you're totally right. It has. And just the concept of saying like, even if it's not a great run, showing up the next day, and just being consistent with it, and just saying like, it's okay when you make a mistake, reset and just show up the next day, has been like a really nice like pressure relieving thing. And I've gotten a lot of hope from that, like the long hours of training. I recommend, if you haven't started running, trying a little bit. It's great, and your whole personality can turn into running like me. But when you say, Abby, that it's not automatic, like where have you felt in your life this year that you've had to make that switch of just saying like, okay, this is like, I have to turn on the switch to get out of bed in the morning, or to try a different project? Where have you found that for yourself?
I've found it in everything. Like, I don't think there's been a single day this year where I've woken up and felt hopeful.
Not a single day.
No. I mean, there's just like so much stuff happening. And to me, that's proof that I'm never going to automatically feel hopeful unless I actively work throughout the day to hopefully end the day in a more hopeful spot than when I began it. And that comes from being really intentional about it. And I don't know what you're saying about like, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Is it enough? I think that is a really theoretical question, and I think you're never going to answer it, because I don't think you're ever going to get to a point where like you're doing enough.
Or that doesn't exist. That answer doesn't exist, probably.
Yeah, because I don't know what that means. I think
Yeah.
I think that question might be more relevant if you had $1 billion and a foundation, or you could like actually impact people in a huge way. Then it might be like, yeah, am I giving enough? Am I doing, like, you could do infinitely more. But I think if you're someone where you're not coming to the table with a ton of resources and you're still learning, or you don't know where to start, you don't know what your purpose is, I don't think that question is helpful. Because I think what we keep hearing about is like, just take a step, find something you care about and take one step, and that's enough for today. And then tomorrow take one more step, and that's enough for that day. And then like your capacity for impact is only going to grow, and what constitutes enough will expand. But that, I don't think that's a helpful way to think about it when you're starting out, because like the best you can do is what is directly in front of you to do, you know?
Exactly. And almost like thinking way too forward in the future will trip you up in the present. And it's interesting, like we've been talking about like, how do we talk about a different message moving forward in the future, of just saying like, how do we get beyond just taking the next step? But it honestly feels like it's so much of what to do, of just like do exactly what's in front of you. Like maybe we don't have to make it more complicated
I
than
don't
that.
think
And
it
we've
is.
heard that in a we've heard that like in a million different ways. Whether it's Keikashan and her work with combining sustainability and gender rights, where in projects around the world she's helping women stay safer and creating more sustainable environmental impact in the Pacific Islands. Or whether it's Aileen with just practical steps of how do you get out of bed the next morning after the Scottish independence referendum was lost, and how do you still continue that fight even despite that electoral loss? And Connor with his work with countering police and freeing prisoners that are political prisoners, and advocating for Palestine. I think it's happened in so many different ways that people are just like, when you have a setback, when you have limited resources, how do you find one person to work with? How do you just take that one next step? How do you refine that value? And yeah, you're right, it's less than automatic. But then but it doesn't take that much more to just find that light switch, and that can often set up momentum by itself.
One of my favorite episodes this year was talking with Sam about Food Not Bombs, because in so many ways that started so small, of just let's cook some food in our house and provide meals for people outside. That's pretty small. Take some organization and maybe a little bit of skill in the kitchen, but not too intimidating. Like you could, people can do that. And now it's like basically an institution. It's been going, I forget how many hundreds of meals, like for how many years he's been doing it. But that was just like a decision he made one day to serve meals outside. And now think about how many people have been fed because of that. And that's just so small. It's so local, but it's so impactful. And
he's literally helped people live.
Yeah. And now he's somehow engaged in this like battle against the city of Burlington. And, I'm sure if you had asked him when he first started off, like, would you be prepared to fight this legal battle with the city of Burlington over Food Not Bombs? He'd be like, I have no clue, but he's had enough experience at this point that he's equipped to do it. And I think that's what taking the first step means, is it's a first step, and then there's a second and a third and a fourth. I mean, if we're taking it daily, if you take one step daily at the end of a year, you're 365 steps ahead. That's way farther along than you were when you started off. I think that's amazing. And that's possible. Like, it's actually possible, but it isn't, like, it doesn't happen automatically. And I feel like we just can't stop talking about it. I think that this is a big part of it, is one, acknowledging the absolute chaos and, just like terrible situation the world is in, because we're not just being blindly optimistic. Like, it's important to acknowledge what we're up against, but also knowing that the only way we're going to win this is if we believe we can and work towards that. And so we're not going to succumb to like the media wanting us to feel hopeless.
Yeah. And getting beyond what a lot of media and the powers that be making us feel hopeless, whether it's due to getting us to read more of that information, whether it's to leave us divided, whatever the reason may be, finding those individual connections on the ground and finding the builders. Shout out to my mom. She told me something when I was little that has stuck with me about, like, there's people in the world that are builders and people in the world that are destroyers. And I was very little when she told me this, and it was like, oh, interesting. And she was like, which one do you want to be in this world? And obviously we can be both at different times, and sometimes destruction is a good thing. I'm not saying that, but it's interesting of just like that idea of like looking for the builders around you, especially ones that align for your values. They are out there. And we try to host some of them on this show. Surrounding yourself with them, reading the memoirs, listening to their words, I think is a step of just saying like, okay, there are still people doing things. And look what happened like in New York. I think the culmination of this efforts of hope has been with Zohran Mamdani's election. Talk about a rebuttal for Trumpian values of just saying like, we can make amazing systemic change with proper organizing. And that by itself, I think, is proof that we can do something.
Right.
Yeah.
And you think of like even just, I mean, that's such a good example. And I think like we're going to be using that as an example for a very long time, because it like that disproved so many kind of prevailing theories. It disproved the fact that establishment party officials are the ones that like lock us into this like never ending cycle of no change. It went against this idea that people have lost motivation to go out and vote, to get involved, that like we're tired, we've lost all hope. It just proved all of that. And like even just voting is like a first step. And so many people went out. No, I mean, I'm not even talking about the people that like canvassed and volunteered and worked, but just the people that got up and voted for him. Like that just shows to me that there is still hope in the city. And I've seen people from all over the country and all over the world so excited about Zoran's win. And I'm like, yeah, it can happen anywhere. So I think looking to those victories and celebrating those victories are really, really important, because it's a reminder that we can do this, that it's hard, it's going to take a lot of work. But I mean, when he first ran for office, I'm sure there was one day where he decided, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to take the first step, whatever that was. And then look what happened a few years later.
And I'm excited too, because now Brad Lander, who is a close ally of his, is running for Congress in my district. And he's going against Dan Goldman, who has not done very much and has been a kind of an obstacle for a lot of change in Congress. And it's been kind of been a Trump pushover. And I'm excited to find ways to volunteer for him. So there's things on the horizon that are here. A last question to wrap up with. If you had one hope, I've been trying to get punnier. It hasn't worked. Actually, no, I haven't been trying to be punnier. I'm realizing that my sense of humor comes from my lovely personality and not from puns. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you're not a punny person.
No, I'm not a punny person. There are people in this world, shout out to Elena, who is a past guest, and others, Sam Sitar, my great friend of mine, also shout out to him, who are very punny in this world. I'm not one of them. Anyways, you can't. No, you're not either.
I'm not pretending to be.
Okay. Well, if you are, great. If not, don't pretend to be like us.
Glad we established that.
Yeah. Well done. What is your hope for this coming year with our podcast?
I hope that we can turn these conversations into real action. We've done this year for our first hope focus year. We've had so many amazing conversations. I'm sure we'll have a lot more of them next year, but I don't want this podcast just to be a platform and an archive of stories, but I also want it to be a kind of a focal point for organization as well. I don't know what that's going to mean, but I feel like we keep talking about taking the first step. We keep talking about, these pieces of inspiration we get from our guests. And so I'm like, all right, so let's like walk the walk, let's do it.
Walk the walk, talk the talk, and do the do.
What about you? What's your hope for 2026 in regards to this show?
I'm excited to find even more avenues to have these conversations and again build on what we're doing, particularly in the New York area. But I'm excited to explore it throughout the world. We have some cool guests lined up already, that we're excited to talk with. And yeah, I'm just excited to just see the evolution and have this be maybe a like kind of what we're doing right now of like having this be a planning board and not just saying like, oh, here's some good ideas and think back on it, but just saying like, how do we make this a catalyst for ideas? How do we make this podcast really a brainstorming session that can launch us out in the world? And also, I mean, we talk about this at the end of a lot of our podcasts, but we also run a community here called Lyceum in New York, where we try to have topics on lots of different aspects that are meant to improve lives, that are meant to help create better activism, create better community. So please email us if you're interested in joining. We'd love to have more of your participation as listeners. It's been so cool hearing like we have listeners from over 30 countries now, which is so cool and such a widespread community. And so, yeah, from around the world with New Yorkers, we'd love to be in touch with you, hear how the podcast has been impacting you. So, and love to build more on that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, and also just another reminder, if you are hearing this, like, yes, I'm talking directly to you. We need your
very
help.
Uncle Samish.
You. Whatever platform you are currently listening or watching this on, please give us a like, give us a review, leave a comment. If it's possible to
really
subscribe
helps.
or follow, please do that. And here's an extra special bonus challenge. Send your favorite episode from the year to somebody else, someone in your life who you think might like it. That would mean the world to us. So if you could do those two things, that would be just like the best holiday gift you could give to us. We'd really, really appreciate it. And also, like, get in touch. Let us know, which episode did you like especially? What do you want to hear more of? Is there someone that we talked to recently that you're like, oh, let's do a follow-up episode. We can't wait to hear from them again.
Or do you want to talk about something yourself around an idea of hope that you've been thinking about personally?
Please come on, talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. And for everyone listening, we're really grateful for you. Thank you so much for being with us on this crazy journey, and we can't wait to see you again in the new year.
See you again in 2026.
This has been a production of Little Scorpion Studios.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project Spiral. I'm Tim. And I'm all alone in this world.
Okay,
this
sorry.
godforsaken world.